Most characters in books until the 1970s focused on mainly Caucasian Americans, okay? Some teachers that have been teaching for 30 and 40 years, since this multicultural movement is so new, don't have those books that represent like the 80s and the 90s where they do have Native Americans as a lead character or a Latino talking about or representing their culture. So it's very important for us to stay on top of that and get some new materials into our library. Students who do not see any reflection of themselves or who only see a distorted or comical ones come to understand that they have little value in society and in general in school in particular. So for example, prejudices occur both inside and across the culture. So this is what this means. Sometimes you might see an African American making fun of another African American in a way that goes across the cultures. So it does happen across, and it happens outside of the cultures as well. So we have to be, as teachers, be really, really tuned into that in order to eliminate this kind of prejudice. Also, when students are reading a book and they only see these Caucasian characters and they only see things that happen culturally to Caucasians, they feel isolated, okay? And right away when they feel isolated, it's like they turn off and they're not learning or applying what you're trying to teach them to it. So it's a way for them to kind of feel insecure and not confident about their position in the classroom. Okay, the next slide, since we're having technical difficulties, focuses on the core, the Common Core standards, okay? We couldn't open that link for you, but I will gladly, when this presentation is done, give you a copy of the Common Core standards, and there's a few that I really want you to look at that focus on multiculturalism inside of your classroom. So I apologize for that. Okay, so while I was taking my graduate class called Multicultural Literature, I studied a woman who's a pioneer of multicultural literature, and her name is Judith Langer. Okay? Judith Langer has a model of literacy, and her model is called envisionment building. Okay? So, envisionment building means it's a reader's vision. A reader's vision changes dramatically as they move through a story, as does ours. Okay? So these are the first steps that that encompass envisionment building. So 1, being out and stepping in. So this is the initial contact with the book. So the student picks up the book, and automatically what do they see? The title and the cover. Right away, they've made a connection now with it already, without even reading it, okay? And the second is being in and moving through. So they're opening the book, and they're starting to make a personal connection. What language is it written in? What are the colors? Automatically when they see her name's Yoon Hee, okay? Some people might say, Yoon Hee, ha ha ha. How do you receive that in your classroom? Do you let them laugh, okay? So this is the personal connection now our classroom is making with it, okay? So now that they're being in and stepping out, readers reflect on the ways in which the book relates to their own life. So is the Chinese girl that you have in your class really reading this and loving this, and the person next to her is making fun of it, so she feels like she has to laugh at it? That disconnects her from the whole situation, okay? So they're making connections, whether it's positive connections or negative connections. They're still making connections at this point in the story. And by the end, they reflect, and they draw conclusions on it. And a lot of times they draw conclusions based on their race, their gender, their ethnicity, and their age. Okay, so you have to take that into consideration when you choose these kinds of multicultural literature for your classes. So in other words, students believe what they read and what they see. This is one of the most offensive covers to the Asian population. Does anybody know why?
The color.
The color.
That's on a kid's book.
This is, the 5 Chinese brothers. Mm-hmm. They all look alike. That's extremely offensive to the Asian population. They feel like the slanty eyes and the hair pulled back is a stereotype. Think about anybody that you would come in contact with anyway in a random day. Do they all look like this? No, it would be the same equivalent for us since we're all Italian. Most in the room, like every book had a meatball in their face, or everybody's overweight, or everybody's. Well, that's partially true that we all talk like that, but still. So this is very offensive to them. Okay, this Pocahontas or Milan? Pocahontas.
There's another example.
Pocahontas is offensive, extremely offensive to the Native American. They would never wear anything like this. Their hair is not long and flowy in the wind, and if you remember in the end of the story, she chooses a white Caucasian man, which is something that Native Americans in authentic culture books typically don't do. They don't do that, okay? So if you were to talk to someone that's Native American, odds are they would be offended by her, okay? And obviously we all know Cinderella. Cinderella is like the most perfect thing after at the end. It's a fairy tale, and a lot of even girls, when they read it, and they lived happily ever after. Well, who lives happily ever after? So when they're reading, when you put these things, and this is obviously Kunta Kinte from Roots. A lot of people, if you say, especially in middle grades, do you know this? Or people my age, name an African American book. This is the first one they go to. So this is all that African Americans can be or do, is something like this. So these types of literature books, while you think they represent a multicultural, it's not. It's actually doing the opposite for them. Okay, so what makes a book an accurate representation of multicultural literature? We can move to the next one. Okay. Multicultural literature is rich in cultural detail. When you read the book, you will know, or the children that you're reading it to will learn something about culture, okay? Multicultural literature uses authentic dialogue and presents cultural issues in enough depth that the readers can think about them. They can use that metacognition. They can go to the next level. So you're reading a Native American book, okay? They're going to use words that Native Americans would use. You're going to see clothes that Native Americans would wear. Okay? They're learning something about that. This inclusion of culture groups is purposeful and does not fill the quota. So, for example, there's a girl named Stephanie who is an Asian, and now we're going to talk about Chinese food for a second. That's stereotypical. In a book that is Asian, you will typically find someone like Yoon Hee. You'll find a true, authentic name. You will find traditions that they do. While they could be making pasta, it's typically more about rice, or it's typically about recipes they learn from the homeland. They're going to bring that culture into the book, and that's what you want inside your library. Multicultural literature accurately reflects a group's culture, language, histories, and values without perpetuating the stereotype. You will very rarely pick up a Native American book where everybody is all in headdresses all the time, okay? As we talk about the multicultural, the Native Americans, I'll tell you why. But you will very rarely see that. And oftentimes, you will see that in books. Like, it's typical. If I asked you, what do they usually wear, you would say the headdress and the makeup, and that's not typically the case in a true, authentic book. Okay, so I've picked 3 genres that we are going to, I'm sorry. Okay, so here are some themes and topics commonly explored in the culturally conscious literature. Now that's what you need to be thinking, conscious. Be conscious of it. It's not like, ooh, we can't read that book because they're in a headdress. That's okay to have that, but you want to start to incorporate authentic representation inside your library. You want to fill that, like the minority to be like 10%, the fun books, and like 90% rich literature. So these are some of the topics that you're going to see. A lot of times you're going to see racism and legal discrimination, questions of identity, equality, interracial relationships, families and their loyalties and obligations to each other, love and its meaning and manifestations, the effects of beauty, standards that oppress, friendships, everyday rituals and events in life, extraordinary events that create unlikely heroes and heroines, intra-group color differences, struggle for the value of education, and commitment to racial uplift and progress. So I know that's a whole lot to take in, which is why I printed this out for you. Does anybody have any questions right now? Okay. let's go to the next side. So I picked 3 genres to talk to you about, okay? The first is African American text. These are 3 of my favorite books. If you're ever looking for an honest, authentic author for African American text, John Steptoe is like the pioneer. He started when he was 16, and he wrote these books, and they kept shooting him down because he was an African American, and he ended up just creating an empire. So this, I did this actually for my graduate class. This is the story of the Jumping Mouse, and he did Mufara's Beautiful Daughters. This is also a good representation, which I have there for you guys to look at too, of a journey of a little girl and what she's capable of. So these are 3 books that I would recommend for you to put inside there. Okay.
Let's combine Mufara's Beautiful Daughters with Cinderella.
Right.
When you're doing
Absolutely.
fairy tales.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. So, authentic, multicultural African American text is usually written by an African American author. I don't know why. That's just what they say. And it's usually true. In our experience and the research that we have done, for some reason, they're able to capture the history and the culture in a way that others can't. So it's usually written for that, written by them. They describe folk tales a lot. This is where you kind of have to draw the line and use your judgment, because folk tales can tend to get a little colloquial in that they just talk about like things that happen to them, and it's not so much about their culture or like they're describing racism or slavery or anything like that. It's okay. Often they have a mother figure as a role model. That's a huge one. In the little books, you will always see either a grandmother, an aunt, or a mom that always has to instill something like safety or a story, okay? They speak about identity a lot, and it's usually with girls. You'll see that a lot. They always question their hair, or they always question why they're not tall enough like the Caucasian girls that dance. Debbie Allen did a book called Dancing in the Wings, and that was one too. She was kind of lanky and not long enough. So, and it often is related to South and Southern cooking, like their way of life. When you read that, that would be a true and accurate way to like have somebody in class say, "Oh, my grandmom cooks like that." Or so anytime you include those kinds of things, that would be a positive way to put that inside class. Okay. The next one is Native American text. This was the most fun for me to learn about Native American text, and I was kind of shocked by that. But these are 3 books that I would recommend to you. The one there, The Girl Who Loved Wild Horses, for me, that's my favorite Native American book because I think it's very true to the culture. Okay, that's by Paul Goebel. He's a very good Native American author. And this one too, and I'm not sure how to say his name, Joseph Bruhawk, I think, the Bruhawk. He is a very good for middle grades in high school.
Is that, I was going to ask you that. Are they all picture books?
This is more like K to 5, K to 4 maybe,
right.
And these are 5 and up.
Okay.
Yeah, these are 5. The first Strawberries is a really good one too. That didn't come out very well, but these for sure are 5 and up. That wouldn't be content for the little kids.